We've all heard about, seen, and some of us have felt a massive shift in the real estate market in the past 18 months. But what do we do? Do we listen to a guy with a shaggy beard on a podcast? Or do we look for where it's headed? Do we look for advice and inspiration from somebody like a seasoned veteran, Maureen McGarry, with over 25 years of experience, who's seen more than one cycle of ups and downs? Like me, Maureen focuses her time on investors, and in this conversation, she's going to tell you why. She'll deliver time-tested strategies for service, proving that most good real estate agents act as your assistant until they can earn the right to become your agent. Maureen became so good at serving long-term rental investors that she invented proprietary software to help automate that process, to make finding opportunities extremely easy for both the agent and the investor. Sun Tzu says that strategy without tactics is the slowest way to victory, but tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. If you want the best investments in the Minnesota-St. Paul area, there's no better than Maureen McGarry. The market does not determine your income, people. It determines your strategy. So listen to Maureen and learn one great way to get started working with long-term rental investors. Thanks, and enjoy the ride. Well, hello, Maureen McGarry. How are you today?
Hello, I'm good. Thank you. A little chilly up here in Minnesota.
What's the temp up there?
I think it's 15.
That's warm. That's toasty for you folks up there, you northerners.
Yeah, 13. Sorry, it's 13 degrees.
It's still above zero.
I didn't wear a jacket today, so I still consider it sweatshirt weather. I have the jacket in the car.
It's 27 here. I wore 2 jackets just to kind of give you an idea. So that's hilarious.
I get too hot.
Well, today I thought we would just jump right into it and talk about real estate agents and what they need and some tips for them as they enter a potentially tumultuous next little bit in their careers. When did you get your real estate license? When did you start in the business?
Well, I started in the business in 1991. I got my license in January of 1995. So I started in an executive suite leasing company, just as a kind of underling. And then I ended up managing that whole company. And that's when I got my license because I was subleasing space. So it's similar to a shared office space, the WeWork style that everybody talks about now. Yeah, we were doing that back
Co-op working, that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
So how did that go? What was that business like to run?
It was really great for me at the time. I was, in my 20s, and I met, it was kind of an incubator, but not officially an incubator. So I, like one office, I had all lawyers. So I got legal advice whenever I needed it. But
oh, great.
I got some tough skin because those guys are, you got to argue with them every time you have to sign a new lease. But then I met all kinds of other businesses. Some were startups, some were sales offices or different kind of businesses. And I got to a point later on in that career where businesses would come to me for advice on, small businesses. We're thinking of starting this business. What does it look like? What do you think? And I would just kind of give my advice on, what to look at. Here I was running a business, plus I was working with all these small businesses.
So you were kind of coaching entrepreneurs at the time too, really?
Yeah, in some respects, yeah. And back then we used fax machines and copy machines a lot more. Cell phones were kind of coming in, but so we had all that equipment there for them to use. I don't think they do that as much anymore. But.
Was it a lucrative business model, that co-op space?
It could be. It can be, yeah. It also can be really tough because it's like any real estate market. It has its ups and downs. At one point I had a waiting list in one of the buildings, and then other times, I'd have empty spaces. So, it's like any real estate. You have to keep marketing and stay on top of what's going on.
Yeah, I think it was Robert Kiyosaki that said that buying real estate is the easy part, managing it is the hard part. And one of the cool things about talking to you is that you've done both. Because in addition to really making a career out of selling real estate and working with investors, you also own and operated your own management company for long-term rentals as well. So how long did you do all that? Did you move right from managing the co-op space, getting into like long-term leasing, or was there tell me about that.
I had transitioned out of that into residential sales.
Okay.
and some investment sales in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then when the market started, when I started seeing non-cash flowing investment property, I sort of stopped selling it because I couldn't make it make sense in my head. Why would you buy something that lost money every month? And people would tell me, well, it's going to appreciate, or there's, going to be an upside down the road. But for me, that didn't make a lot of sense. And I had a hard time convincing my clients to do that. And so I sold mostly just residential for a while. And then, of course, we know what happened. The market kind of came crashing down in the
Talk
late.
about your business during that time, though.
Well, I mean,
I think we could draw a lot of parallels for agents in this market and kind of extract some overall skill sets that people can use to be able to push forward.
well, I think what you have to do in real estate, and the nice thing about real estate is you can do all kinds of different things. You don't just have to sell. Um, and so when the market was really slow and things weren't selling, and I live in Minnesota, as I said, having a vacant house in the winter here is deadly. It's really dangerous because if the furnace goes out or the battery in the thermostat goes out, you have frozen pipes. And now you're talking tens of thousands of dollars of damage. And so I started going around with bags of batteries to vacant houses and finding empty or finding thermostats that were off. And then I'd call the agents and I'd say, your house here, the heat's off. It's 20 below outside. Do you want me to pop a battery in here? And they just about fall over crying. They were so happy that I caught them.
Yeah,
And then I'd say, hey, do you have time for a conversation? And what I would do then is I would put folks into the houses, stage them, and they were short-term renters then, basically. So they would stay in the house and live there and shovel the snow or cut the grass or whatever while the house was on the market. And then when it sold, they'd move on to another one. And it was a great service. It worked great for all those folks who had empty houses because
mm.
that was really not a good place to be. So that was kind of the mid 2000s up until the market really changed and things started selling again. And, I worked with a lot of short sellers. I worked with a lot of folks that were losing homes that they had bought back when they weren't cash flowing, and now they were underwater on them. And I know one day I was in my office here and I had, I think, 5 different people in that day, all losing properties because of they had bought them at the peak and now they were underwater. They weren't cash flowing. And most of them were crying, like literally tears.
They were
And
investors that were losing their properties.
yeah, but when you say investors, these were married couples, these were single people, these were people that bought the stuff because one couple bought some properties because they wanted extra income to pay for their son's special ed. So, I mean, these are not high net worth people. These are people that struggled to get the properties in the first place. And now they're not just losing the property, they're losing a lot more with the properties. So I worked through that with a lot of my clients where we went to banks, we worked out deals to try to, avoid foreclosure if we could. We worked out short sale deals.
For
Um,
people that are listening that don't know what a short sale is, this is when you sell the property for less than what's owed on the property. So you have to negotiate with the bank to make sure that they'll take less. Then there's a lot of issues in some cases, some depending on your lender. There might be judgment against you, even though they may release the lien, they may not release the liability. I've seen that happen in our market, but it seems like in back in those days when it was really a hardship thing, it seems like banks were just willing to release the lien, release the liability. But then there might be still some tax ramifications if there was maybe a gift of equity or, a charge off or something like that. And I don't know why people call them short sales. They take longer than any other kind of transaction.
yeah,
So
they're not short, they're very long
no,
sales.
no, they're not. And at any point in time, I mean, the lender could change their mind or a new employee got hired and then you had worked out a deal and then no, it didn't meet their discount threshold, and so there was just a lot of negotiation during that time. We all sort of ended up having to become short sale experts in some form or another.
Right.
What was your experience like? Was it pretty easy or was it tedious? Like, others
Well,
have
I mean,
had?
first of all, there was this overwhelming feeling from most people that these banks really needed to sell these properties and they should just take whatever somebody is willing to give them because they got so many of them, they got to get rid of them. That's not the case at all. You're not dealing with a person, you're dealing with a business. They don't, there's no feelings, there's no hurry, there's no set of, so they don't care if you buy their house or not, and they don't care when it happens. And so all the normal things that you would expect to happen in a transaction with a normal human don't happen in a short sale because you're
Not at
not dealing
all.
with a human, you're dealing
Right.
with a corporation.
Yeah,
And
and company policy, right?
yeah,
And employees that are showing up with a stack of files on their desk like this, and you're lucky
yes,
to get any attention,
right,
even if you're the one on top. So,
right. So
yeah.
there is no urgency on the bank's part to sell these or short sale them or work with you. I had much better luck with the local smaller community banks because we could literally go in and meet with them and lay things out. But the bigger banks, it was always a chore. Just getting people on the phone, tracking down who to talk to, what the situation was. But for the most part, I was able to get most of my clients out of those properties, get get a waiver so they weren't going to get sued down the road. And that was more just, yeah, you probably aren't going to, but having that piece of paper makes it a for sure thing.
So let's pause for a minute because, right now in the news, everybody thinks realtors are super rich. There's the lawsuit in, Missouri and Kansas right now saying that, realtors colluded to, change on their commission amounts. There's really essentially right now so many HGTV shows that make real estate investing sexy, that make real estate agents out to be just more glamorous than they deserve, and in fact, wealthier than they deserve. Now, I'm sure there are a few that are, but in my experience, realtors are really advocates. They truly are for their clients. Now, there's a lot of realtors out there that need a little bit of help with class and just general overall business sense, and they try to be attorneys. They try to force things into place rather than work for the deal and work for our clients in the deal. But I really generally have so many times in my life as a real estate agent felt undervalued. It's really a job where I feel like I have to fight to prove to everybody how much value that I provide. And the only people that realize that are the people that I've done business with in the past. That's why I've always said that this business is about creating raving fans, because the rest of the world thinks that we're like car salesmen. I would joke and I would say, hey, yes, us realtors have to get up and wash the slime off of our skin. It just grows there again every night. It regenerates. We're just slimy people. And we have to wash that all off just so that we can go out and do business. But nothing that you said just now at all equals that. You showed up in a down market. You provided strategies that help people out of a financially tough position. They were emotionally distraught in your office, crying. In this time, Maureen, one of the things that you didn't say is that seller has no commission to pay us. This is a short sale. We're having to negotiate with the banks how much we're going to get paid on this deal so we can do one, bring buyers or negotiate with other real estate brokers who have brought buyers and we have to get their commission negotiated too, because they've got buyers. They're trying to do the deal. We've got the relationship with the banks. We've got the relationship with the seller. You're advocating with your seller, trying to make sure that, yeah, they don't get sued. Nothing that you've said makes me think that you are glamorous, wealthy, got too much money. Maybe
Not
you are all
glamorous.
those things. Maybe
That's
you are
right.
all those things, but you are a true advocate for your client. And it's so special to hear that, because I think that's the kind of message that needs to get pushed out more by NAR and by some of these other, advocacy groups for real estate agents, because my gosh, that's why we drink a lot of times. It's such a stressful gig. Every single person that I've done business with is like, wow, this is extremely stressful. You actually bond with your clients in such an incredible way because it's such a stressful situation and because you are that guiding light for them that says, hey, this is when we need to worry, or this is when we don't need to worry, or here's a strategy. Hey, I've been in this situation a dozen times. Here's how we're going to handle this. Like, you want to be on the operating table with the doctor that has seen a lot of stuff, that knows how to handle an emergency when it happens. And that was you back in that time. And probably no one has told you what a phenomenal person you are, and how you've used your knowledge and resources for good. And I just think we need to hear that more as real estate agents, because we hear so much of the other, and it's tough sometimes to live in that environment.
Well, I agree. I mean, I am a real estate broker, and I have been since 2003. So if people don't know what that is, to be a realtor, you have to work under a broker. So I'm a broker, so I can work for myself or anybody else. But there's many times when I get a deal going and somebody sends me an offer and they've written it wrong, or they've done something that I could say, oh dear, we could really take advantage of this situation. The first thing I always do is talk to my client, because I feel like they need to know what happened. But then they always agree with me that we need to do the right thing.
Let's use an example. Let's use a real life example for like a home inspection deadline or something like that. Like
Yeah,
if they're
there
about to
was a home
pass.
inspection deadline, and they scheduled the inspection for after the deadline, you know. And I could have just said, okay, that's fine, whatever, whatever you find, it's going to be not my problem because you're after the deadline. And it was a tight deadline, and we knew that. The agent needed to send me an amendment changing the timeline for the inspection, and I didn't get that. And I talked to my client and I said, here's the deal, and they said, look, we don't have anything to hide. We're not afraid of their inspection. We should do this the right way and give them the extra time. And so I went back to the agent, of course, and said, you have to send me an amendment so we can add some extra time here.
Yeah, otherwise, if the deadline passes, you have
Yeah.
really, they have no recourse, right?
Right,
Because you've got,
right,
and
right.
so it's good that you talked to your client first and gave them the the option to decide what they wanted to do. That's true advocacy. But sometimes as real estate agents, if we advocate for the deal, we, with our clients' permission and full communication, essentially getting to the finish line is as much of a success for both parties, is because that's what both parties really want. And the challenges that arise, I've always wondered why buyers and sellers and their agents become so adversarial. It's funny to me how much mistrust people instantly go to in a real estate transaction. They're like, oh, well, this is what they're trying to do. Listen, the buyer has as little experience as you do, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, And in some cases, there are some attitudes that come up. But I like being an experienced agent because I'm not worried anymore about the things that can happen in a real estate deal, because they're just things that happen
Yeah.
and they can be fixed. Whether it's termites or broken pipes,
We don't have
everything can be
termites up here.
negotiated.
Actually, too cold for termites.
Too cold for termites. How about that?
One thing I always tell my clients when we start working together is you need to figure out what your win is. So what is your win? Is it buying your dream house? Is it buying your first investment or your 10th investment, whatever that is? And then stick to that goal. And your win might also mean that the seller or the buyer gets to win too. We don't care what they walk away with. It doesn't have to be a win-lose situation. It can very well, and it should be almost a win-win. But let's not get ourselves wrapped up in what are they thinking, or they're trying to get us, or I don't want them to get away with this. I don't want them to win. I want to have the last word. That's not what it's about. It's about, what is your goal? Let's stick to that. As long as we get our goal, I don't want to say we don't care, but we don't care how the other side feels. Hopefully they're happy, but we're not going at it just to beat them. That's not our goal here. It's not, if you want to beat somebody, go join a soccer team. We're not here to beat the other team up. We're here to get your goal met, your need met. And once they kind of think about that, then when we start negotiating price, for instance, and we're down to $1,000 and everybody's like, what the heck? It's like, look, stick to your goal, stick to your what you want, and don't think about them getting the last word. If this works for you, then it works for you. Don't worry about whether it works for them or not.
Yeah, I've always described the closing process as like having a baby. Um, Obviously I've never personally had a baby, but I've been there with my wife
That's
holding
great.
her hand. So
A
you know what
little
I'm
bit.
talking about. And I'm like, hey, sometimes this is going to be painful, but I'm here, for you to white knuckle my hand while we're going through it and to encourage you. And sometimes it's messy. Sometimes we need doctors to come in, but in the end, we all get what we want, and we all get to move into a new chapter of our lives, which is very special. Because for a lot of people during that time, and when I was doing it, when I was negotiating short sales, I mean, I would have to hold somebody's hand, a seller, while they had to bring 20 grand to the table just to be able to liquidate their asset so they could go move to Arizona and be with their grandkids, which is what they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a stark contrast to 2 years ago when there was 15 buyers for every property.
Right.
So it's interesting for people like us who have been in a full cycle of the marketplace. So what similarities are you seeing now that you've been in the market in a down market, that now the market has shifted completely and it's actually in an odd place? I don't even want to say it's in a down market. I would say we're in a suppressed market because of interest rates. But tell me what your opinion is of all this.
Well, I think it's interesting because, you know, we are seeing interest rates back up to where they were in the early to mid 90s. And so most young buyers have never seen anything like this. They think it's out of control, the interest rates. What I'm seeing for investors is things are starting to sit longer, and so even though prices aren't dropping significantly, at least in this market, when something sits longer, that's when you start being able to have some negotiation ability.
It's like a normal market. It's normal. I mean,
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
people think this is bad, but they're still buyers. Real estate is a need-based asset. So it's a product that people need to move into because they've had another child or they've blended a family or they've moved or, it happens that we need to relocate from time to time. We're transient people, we're humans. This is what we do. And also, people pass away and people get divorced and they have needs and they liquidate assets, and that's always going to need to be there. And when a market driver happens, like interest rates or like a massive wave of foreclosures, which, tanks property values and people become upside down in their properties, and they don't sell or they can't sell, which is essentially the case right now. Very few people will volunteer to get out of a 3 or 4% interest rate and just move up to a bigger house because they want to, because it's not as affordable. They'll just stay in their house or add on a room, or they'll remodel because it makes more practical sense. People get more frugal in times of uncertainty. And so what that does is it creates a pent up demand in real estate. So people don't realize it now, but all these agents who are leaving the market right now, this is the best time to educate yourself. This is the best time to get your systems down pat. This is the best time to do the things you never had time to do it before because you were running so crazy. Because when the market comes surging back, and it will, you will be ready to receive your unfair share of business because you treated your business like a business. What do you think of all that?
I think you're right. And I think this is a great time to come up with some new strategies, because that's when you can really think of what are the needs out there right now and how can I meet them? And that's what I'm looking at right now in my business. Buyers right now are strapped for cash. So, there's a lot in this market here. If you wanted to flip a house the last few years, forget it. You had to go knocking on doors to find something. Now there's houses sitting on the MLS that you could flip easily. And the reason is because buyers don't have the cash to do that. They want something that's done. And so you have to start getting versed on all these different things and what buyers are looking for, what sellers are looking for, and how you can meet that need. And I agree. When the market was crazy and every property was getting 10 offers. How many offers were you writing for one client? 15, 9. I remember, you probably do too.
Oh yeah.
Writing one offer for a client, doing the job one time, not 15 times.
Right.
And getting paid. So that's the other nice side of the market leveling out is you're going out, you're looking at properties, you're saying, okay, yeah, I thought about it. That's the one I want. You write an offer and you buy the house. You're not up against 12 other offers. So, there is a lot of time right now to learn some of that, but there's also a lot of opportunity right now. And I'll tell you what, investors have been waiting for this market for a long time.
When did you start working with investors? You started off, with a kind of a small management gig, and then you got into residential sales. At what point did you have this aha that, okay, investors are who I want to work with?
Well, it's funny because I always kind of did. I bought the first property I ever bought myself was a duplex, and I didn't even have a real estate license at the time. I was in my mid 20s, and I thought, I don't know what I want to do the next several years, but if I buy a house and I decide I want to go back to school or something, I don't want to have this big mortgage, so I bought a duplex. And after I put the offer in, there was a story in the newspaper here in St. Paul, and here's a picture of the house I'm buying.
Wow.
And a whole story about how smart the buyer is who's buying this duplex, and it's running all the numbers on this duplex. So it's a whole story about buying investment property and how brilliant the buyer was because these were the kind of numbers and this is what was going to happen. And I'm thinking, oh, they're talking about me.
How about that?
So I moved into that, and my brother moved in next door and with his buddy. And after about a year, I said to my brother, I now have my real estate license. I said, I can't take your money anymore. You got to go buy a place. So I started selling investment property to family and friends. And that's when I really got started on it. And the funny thing is, most of them still own those properties.
Really?
Yeah, they do. And so, then when the market kind of turned, I backed off a little bit. And then when it came back, I'm back in it now. So, yeah, it was just always something. I guess being in the commercial leasing space, I wasn't afraid of the leasing piece and management piece that sometimes people are afraid of. It didn't scare me at all. So I lived on one half, and I had a tenant on the other half.
So getting into working with investors wasn't about you like 3Xing your business. It was more about, hey, this works as a process for me as a young person to build wealth and a little bit of equity. And hey, because it works so well for me, I'm going to talk to my family about it because they're in the closest proximity to you. Sounds like you even challenged your brother a little bit and said, hey, I can't take your money. You need to go buy a place because this is a good thing for you.
Yep.
And so you kind of put his needs before your own because it would have been nice to have a good, easy, long-term renter in there. And so is that kind of how it worked? You just actually saw the value of owning an asset.
Right. I mean, I was, in my 20s, and here are all my friends and things are in their 20s, and we all have jobs and we're making money and we're paying rent. And I'm saying to them, look, you can buy this duplex like I did, and you can live in that one side of it or one half of it and pay almost nothing and rent the other half out. And they're like, tell me more. And so that's what I did. And that then they referred people to me, and that's how the business grew. So it was really, just kind of that ability to say, if I can help these people I know, then they'll tell other people. And, it's the sphere of influence everyone's always talking about, but then that grows. Now in my business, I offer property management to my investors. And so, they love it because they don't, I honestly, and I don't even know if I should say this, I have a lot of clients that never see their properties. They buy them sight unseen. They've never seen them. And because I buy them and I manage them, and they don't really care what they look like. And they look great, don't get me wrong. But I mean that, it's a financial transaction. So
Have you ever bought stock?
what do you mean?
Have you ever bought stock on the
Oh
stock
yeah.
market?
Yeah.
Did you ever see that?
No.
And so we're conditioned in real estate because it's such a tangible item to want to see it. Sight unseen properties in the past 2 years was all that our folks were buying because there was no time for people to come to a second home destination to look at it. Actually, what we would do is we would book tours. Investors would come and then we would tour them around and show them these are some subdivisions that there's nothing available, but we want you to have a mental map and put eyes on these so that when we call you, time to put in an offer, right? So sight unseen properties is a function of the investor client, which is why I think real estate agents are so essential. They bought property from you sight unseen because they knew you, they trusted you, and you had a track record of success, not just for them, but for their friends or your book of business. And when you can say that as a real estate agent to repeat customers. I mean, isn't that the game in real estate? We're all just out to go find raving fans so we can get that repeat and referral business. If you're a brand new real estate agent and you're 1 to 3 years in the business, this is the toughest time in your business because you are having to create everything. If I got jumped back into the residential real estate business again, I would go buy a book of business. I wouldn't generate it myself because it just takes way too long. And after you get to about year 5 and you've done a really good job and you've had a really good training, or you're with a brokerage or a mentor or a team leader or a coach that's going to help you put those systems in place, there was no greater feeling to me than right around year 2 or 3 when I got a referral from somebody who I had done business with. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, it was a function of why am I spending all of my time and money marketing for one client who's going to buy one house every 5 to 7 years, right? That's sort of the national average. Why not go work with investors who are going to buy one house a month? For me, I was just trying to feed my family and I was trying to serve investors. When the market crashed and nobody could buy anything, I said, well, I'm just going to be of service to millionaires. Certainly they need to make a return on their money. So I figured out how to get them a return on their money in the short-term rental business model, prior to Airbnb. And so it was exciting for me to be able to see results in people so fast and to have
Right.
them come back and buy another property. And then for me to be able to use those tools for myself. And so was it that for you? Like, I mean, I know that managing long-term rentals, it can't be a real rewarding business, but yet you did it to serve your clients.
Well, I'm a big believer that you have to understand what you're buying, and there has to be a certain, you know, the biggest problem with investment properties is that in my opinion, is that they're not managed well. And one of the things I see all the time is they're under rented, meaning their rents are not where they should be in the market. And I can go on and on about why people sometimes think, oh, I'm doing my tenant a favor, I'm keeping their rents low, so they don't need new, blinds on their windows, or they don't need a new faucet. We'll just tape that one together. That isn't how tenants think. They'd rather pay what they're expecting to pay for a market and have a nice place. I think, for me with investors, I've had investors start from nothing, where they don't have any properties, and they've come to me and say, okay, this is what I want to build. And I kind of enjoy putting those pieces together. And I've had some that start and buy a few duplexes, and we renovate them and raise the value and sell them and go buy bigger, and then now we have big apartment buildings. Management is a key piece, and I'm not saying realtors should go out and start a management company, because it's not for everyone. But I am saying that if you're going to sell to investors, find a management company that does a good job, that knows what they're doing, that knows how to price things, that keeps things at market. Go see their properties. How do they keep their properties? Do they keep them nice? Are they dirty? Are they well cared for? Because that's who you want to set your clients up with once they buy. If they're going to self-manage, that's one thing, but my clients aren't self-managing anything. So they need somebody that they can trust to manage it. You need to make sure, if you're selling them a property that's going to cash flow, that you got a manager that's going to make sure that that's going to happen. And if they're keeping the rents low and charging an arm and a leg for the services, it's not going to happen. So it's a full circle thing. You have to look at the big picture. I love you know clients buying things sight unseen because it's a quick process. I go out, I vet the properties. Then I mean nowadays we have FaceTime and WhatsApp, so I can get them on a video and walk them through it, and they like that. But it's the trust that the management is going to be handled correctly, and so the numbers that we're expecting to hit are going to be probably hit. And that's really the critical piece, I think, for investors. If they're making money, investors' first thing should be to look at the numbers, not the property. If you have an investor that's saying, let's go look at a bunch of properties, that's you need to sit them down and explain to them how to be an investor. Because the first thing you should worry about is, are you going to make any money on this property? You have to get past the whole, I like the property, or I think it's pretty, or I like where it's at, or whatever. That's not what it's about. It's about, is it rentable? Is it flippable? Is it in a place where other people are going to want to live? Are there issues with it that's going to make it hard to rent? I mean, I've turned down a lot of properties because I said to my clients, you know what, this is going to be really hard to rent. Like, there's no bathtub in the house. It's really hard to rent a house with no bathtub.
Especially to somebody with kids, right? Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing.
We would do the same thing in the short-term rental business. As developers were creating inventory, we were so thankful for it. But then they would turn around and ask us, what do we need to put in these properties? And, showers, a lot of people just shower when they're on vacation. But these are families that are coming and staying in these properties. And we're like, you got to have a couple bathtubs in here because somebody's got 2 and 3-year-olds and they bathe these kids. Yeah, you can set them down in the shower, but kids get slippery, in a shower. You need to set them down and take care of them a little bit.
Yeah.
Did you use spreadsheets to educate your buyers, or what process did you use?
Yeah, I have. Well, I started out with some spreadsheets, and then I had, I encourage my investor clients to have their own ability to do due diligence. Sometimes I give them spreadsheets. A lot of times they come up with their own. But I analyze every property before I even send it to them. And I say, here's what I think this property can do. And then a lot of times, I have one client, he's always like, I'll tell you what it's going to do. I'll get back to you after I've run the numbers. So I like that because he's satisfying himself. I morphed those spreadsheets after a while into a technology that I developed to find investment property faster, because anybody that's ever used spreadsheets to analyze investment property knows that it's very time consuming and you can't get through all the properties. You can analyze, 10, 12 an hour, and there's 68 duplexes in that neighborhood for sale right now. So how do you know which one is the best one to buy? And so I developed a software that analyzes everything on the market and then tells me these are the best 10 or 20 or 60 or whatever it is, based on what that investor's criteria is.
That's amazing. When I started off in analyzing investment properties, I used worksheets. I would make copies of a class that I took of a workbook that I bought, and I would just use handwritten worksheets. So for me, creating an Excel spreadsheet was a massive automation. So you've taken it one step further, and you actually hired a software developer to develop some software and describe exactly how it works for, is it an investor or an agent that is using it?
Well, I use it within my business. And so let's say that you wanted to buy a rental property in Minneapolis, and you were going to finance it. We would put in, the terms of your financing, your interest rate, how much you're putting down, that type of thing. Some information on what you're looking for, obviously what your price range is. And then, you want a duplex or you want a single family or whatever it is you're trying to rent out. And the area that you want, whether it's a county or a zip code or whatever that is. And then we can put in things that we want to budget for. So for instance, if we know we want to set money aside like a townhome association does and have a kind of a capital expenditure budget, we can put that in. If we have maintenance budgets, we can put those in, or we can leave that all blank. But a lot of investors will say, I want an 8% cap rate, or I want a 7% cap rate or higher. So we can put in the cap rate, we can put on a cash on cash return, which is the return on the cash you put down. So if you put 20% down, and I like to look at this with investors who are financing. If you're putting 100,000 down, what kind of return are you getting on that 100,000? And then it actually goes into the MLS and searches everything that meets that criteria. So for instance, single family homes in that price range, and comes back with however many that it deems would return that kind of cap rate and cash on cash. So that's what it does. And then I have all the numbers, I have all the information. I can send those right out to my clients. And a lot of times, even from there, I'll do more due diligence on those properties because I want to know exactly what I'm sending them. By the time I send something to them, they could buy it. That's where I've taken it, so that, one of the things I want to make sure is that if they're buying something, are they buying the best property? Mm. And that, how do you know that if you haven't looked at all the property?
Right. It seems like that's kind of what your software gives them the opportunity to do. If it goes in there and analyzes all the properties, you just save that investor a half a day and yourself maybe 2 days. I mean, we would have people come to the Branson Tri-Lakes area and we would drive them around the lake for an entire day. But if we had software that plugged right into our MLS and said, hey, there's 4 properties that meet your buy criteria, let's go look at those 4. If one of them fits the bill, then you've just saved everybody a lot of time. And that's phenomenal. I think I think we're leaving the information age now because information is just available for free to so many different people. And we're now entering kind of an automation age. I didn't read this anywhere. This is just generally what I feel as I observe the world I live in. It's so forward thinking of you to develop that. And you actually developed it with your own money. You hired a developer, you invested your own money to do it for your clients originally, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it came down to, do I hire a bunch of people just to come and sit and analyze properties, or do I figure out a way to? I assumed someone had already done it, and I couldn't find it anywhere. There's a lot of software out there that you will have one by one properties, that you can, gives you some detail or some analytics on an individual property, but I need to know in the market overall. If I'm showing a client from Toronto, if I have a client in Toronto that's buying here, that's not coming here, I want to be sure that I'm showing them the best properties, not just a couple that work, but the best ones that work for them. This allows me to do that. And I think, obviously I'm not expecting another huge crash like we had in the 2000s, but, I want to make sure that they're going to have the cash flow, that they're going to have. I always build in what I call a plan B, which is, if you're planning on flipping the property and you can't flip it, can you rent it? If you're planning to rent it and you're having trouble renting it, can we sell it? What are our options, so that if the thing that you thought you were going to do isn't working out, what's our other option?
Yeah, multiple exit strategies, right? That seems to be the name of the game in the real estate world. We get to analyze that first year rate of return before we buy it. And that's a cool thing. We don't get a chance to do that with stocks. We don't get a chance to do that because it's all guessing, right? We don't get a chance to do that with bonds and with any other type of investments that we might make, mutual funds or whatever. But with real estate, there's a trajectory there. There's a historical income record. There's a lot of factors. There's data points that allow us to predict with a great deal of accuracy what the future is going to do, barring any kind of weird virus that hits the planet, or interest rates that go up 12 times in a year, or China doing this or that, or bombs going off in some country. It just seems like every 2 years there's something nationwide that happens that freaks people out, that makes life a little bit hard to predict. But real estate tends to be a relatively predictable asset class, and you've now made it easier to find and locate properties in your market. So what's your plan with your software? What do you want to do with it?
Well, I'm looking to expand it to, hopefully nationwide. I'd like to get it in every, realtor's hands, and eventually maybe every investor's hands. Because I think, again, it comes down to understanding what you're buying ahead of time. And, I have in the course of my management, I've had a lot of people bring me properties and say, I want you to take over and manage this for me because my current manager is no good and I'm not making any money. And then I look at it and I say, yeah, you're not going to make any money. Sorry. um,
Here's the hard truth. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm not one to sugarcoat things. I get that a lot from people. You didn't sugarcoat that for them, but you know, you didn't buy something that was going to ever make you any money. So what we need to do now is figure out how to survive. Tread water with this thing. Do
Yeah.
we sell it? Do we? Sometimes we go out and we buy a bunch more properties to boost it up. Now we've got revenue coming in from other properties that can support that one too. Um, so it just depends. But um, yeah, I'd like to get the software out to every realtor. I'm, frankly, it's a no-brainer with investors. When I show them the software, they're done. They don't interview anyone else. Um, I'm shocked at the number of times I've heard from my clients that worked with other people that said, yeah, they just sent me a bunch of listings. And when we talked about cap rate, their eyes kind of glazed over and they didn't know what we were talking about.
Yeah.
And I do feel sorry because I know I've personally searched for all of the investment classes I can for realtors. It's hard. There aren't many.
Right.
Um, but realtors need to understand, if you're selling a duplex, you need to understand what you're selling, or frankly, you got no business selling it.
I've
And
thought that 100%. I mean, when I was a residential agent, if I got a rare commercial deal, I would talk to a commercial agent and I would partner up with that person to make sure that that client was protected and that I was, the not the lead on the property, but that I was there to help manage and strategize because I was learning as well. And it was worth it for me to pay 50% of that commission as an education so that I could learn and get better.
right.
And as a short-term rental authority coming up through, 2006 until now, I've had a lot of people, they just want to learn. They want to learn the information. They just wanted, other realtors would come to my area, they would buy a property and then sort of not need you anymore. But that's okay. We do a lot of giving because you reap what you sow. But that's essentially how I was able to grow my brokerage from, such a large um, volume, not just in production, but in agents in such a short time, is because I was willing to teach.
Mhm.
And I was willing to teach in a down market and a normal market so that by the time we got to a hot market, I had 40 agents that were out there kicking butt. So it was great. It was a beautiful thing. And now I'm like you. I want to take that expertise to the largest population possible because I've always really had a heart for real estate agents and investors because I know real estate agents have it tough, tougher than what they're given credit for. And I also know that investors are in large part, the ones that you described. They're just people who are looking to get an edge in life and they want to pay for something. They want a life that they can't provide for themselves working a 40-hour a week job. They have goals for their family that they want to see come to fruition, and they do that by taking risk. And I think a lot of times Wall Street and our government doesn't really take into account what it really feels like to be on Main Street and to have to take that kind of risk and leverage yourself to the hilt, just to be able to make a couple $1,000s a year cash flow, to be able to put that away, to be able to refinance and pull cash out and pay for a deck that's rotting off of a property that you bought 4 years ago, and then reinvest the money in the asset and hope that it continues to go up in value and hope that you'll be able to continue to have renters. It's just been very difficult for the average Joe to find something that's going to give them that edge in life. And real estate has always been that. That's why I've always had both feet in real estate as an agent and an investor. And that's why I love agents and investors so much, is because I've seen that incredible power that it has given them as individuals to compete with. In my case, at Airbnb, why should Paris Hilton get all the money, right? I mean, she's wasting it. She's blowing it. She doesn't even know what kind of life she had. But if the investors that I talked to had half the money that she had, they would be much better stewards of it. And
Right.
that's what I want to see. I want to see more intelligent people who are better stewarding their money because they're better moms, they're better dads, they're better citizens. They just really seem to care. And it's surprising to me how I do come across somebody who's just infected with the love of money. And it's really disgusting to me, honestly, now when I see how many opportunities are out there and how many just stand up people that I've had the great privilege to work with in my career. And then you come across somebody who'd slit your throat for $2. It's hard to choke down sometimes.
Well, it's not, I always figure it's not worth it. One commission isn't worth any of that. These investors are the majority of investment property in this country is owned by mom and pops. That's a fact. Despite what everyone thinks that corporations, hedge funds are buying everything, that's not the case. The idea that all landlords are rich sitting in their ivory towers is not true. And the fact that they make a lot of money isn't true either. You're absolutely right. They're leveraging themselves. They're putting themselves out there. The difference between real estate and stock is that if you lose your money on the stock, you're out. You're done. You hit rock bottom. Done. Real estate can keep taking, and it can keep taking, and that's what happened in the 2000s. It ruined people because it went far below what they had spent on it. And so it really is a dangerous asset if you don't understand what you're doing. And this mindset that, well, my mortgage with taxes and insurance is $1,200 and I can get $1,800 for rent, so I'm making $600 a month. That's not accurate. And so you really need to understand what you're buying. I don't want to scare people, but if you don't have experience and you haven't managed property, and I go on these chat groups all the time, and I can't even respond to a lot of them because they're in other states and I don't know what their laws are. But some of the things I see people doing just boggles my mind. And it's because they didn't know what they were doing. They're now self-managing. They don't know how to deal with something that's going on. The tenant's doing something or there's a problem. I had a conversation with a neighbor not too long ago, and he said, well, he owns 6 investment properties and he manages them himself. And his wife won't let him buy anymore. And I said, why won't she let you buy anymore? He said, because she says I work Saturdays at them and she doesn't want me working Sundays. And I said, well, why don't you just hire someone to manage them for you? And then you could buy as many as you want, right? And he says, yeah, but I'm not going to pay somebody else to manage them. I thought, wow, if he found out what I charge to manage, and I usually only take on my own clients as management, he would be shocked. And his wife would have probably signed the contract if I handed it to her, just
Oh
so she
yeah.
got it back,
I've
because
had the same issue with real estate agents that are driving themselves crazy because they have 9 deals working and they won't pay $350 per transaction for a transaction coordinator to help them manage the deal. Or they won't hire a part-time admin or a full-time admin
yeah,
because we don't understand the value of our time. We understand the value of our money, but we don't understand how much money we could buy with our time if we were to buy it back for
it
such a
doesn't make
low
you
price.
lazy. It doesn't make
Yeah.
you lazy. It makes you
No,
smart.
it does.
you know and
100%.
I took over. I have a lot of brothers. I took over one of my brother's properties that I sold him years ago to manage a couple of years ago, and his rents were sorely under market. And the tenant was leaving, so I said, this is what I'm going to price it at. It's going to be this much. And he said, you're crazy. You're not going to get that. And I said, I'm going to get it. He said, no, you're not. You're crazy. And so for like the next week, he called me all hours of the day and night saying, I don't think you're going to get that. You're out of your mind. And finally I said, hey, do you just not want to make any money or what's the deal here? He said, no, I want to make money. I said, then why are you telling me I can't do it when I'm telling you I can? And he goes, well, we'll do it. Go ahead. And I said, I will. And I did. But he had it in his head that it just couldn't happen. His property was not worth that much. He just was not worth it.
Hmm.
And I was like, you got a great property in a great area. It's absolutely worth that and more. So don't undervalue it. Just like we undervalue ourselves sometimes, don't undervalue your property, and realtors shouldn't undervalue themselves either. I mean, I agree with you. Get some help. If you need it, get help because it shows up at the end of the day with your clients. if you're juggling too many things.
It shows
You're
up
not.
with your family, and with
Oh,
all the things
absolutely.
you wanted to do with your time.
Right.
It really does. It eats into that.
Right.
So it's so good to talk to you because you've got so much experience in the marketplace. We train a lot of new agents even now. There's a lot of new agents entering the market because they want to change their life, and real estate is a great way to do that. People are like, "Well, Jeremy, why are you training new agents right now? Because, it's such a tough time for them to get in." Well, it's because I got in 2006, I started in 2006, 7, 8. You're not going to convince me that, it's a better time to come into the market when I got in. I've got belief in myself that I can make it happen. And so I believe in new people when they come in, and a lot of times that's all they need. My belief is enough for them. For you to have somebody that believes in you, that's it's like having rocket fuel. Being able to wake up every day and know that there's somebody that believes in me and they're willing to share their resources, their secrets, their just the lay of the land is so special for people. And I think investors need that now more than anything, and agents. So, any one or two things that you can think of that maybe a mindset or a tactic, anything that you could just send them off with to just kind of give them a gold nugget in their pocket?
Well, I've had just in the last year, I've had several very experienced. I had a realtor, I had a mortgage person who owns a mortgage company. Very experienced people come to me and say, "I'm really embarrassed, but I don't know what a cap rate is. I'm really embarrassed. I don't know what return on investment, ROI means, whatever, and I don't know what to do. And can you explain this?" Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to get the information. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and I'm certainly happy to talk to anybody that needs help, because that's how we learn. And sitting back and pretending like you know it all isn't going to help you. So, I was fortunate early on in my career. I had a broker that literally did know it all. He wrote some of the law here in Minnesota, and he trained me very, very well. Not everybody has that. So reach out, if you're interested, reach out. And if you have the ability to help other people, then do it.
Well, what we're going to do is we're going to put your contact info in the show notes and in the description of this particular podcast, so somebody can reach out to you if they want to buy an investment property or have it managed up there in the St. Paul area. Or if somebody wants to come along and help you expand your software that you've developed nationwide, then they can reach out to you for that as well. Maureen, it's been great talking to you about real estate strategies. You're a wealth of knowledge and just a great human being, and I always enjoy speaking with you.
It was great to talk to you. And I feel the same way about you, Jeremy.
All right. Well, let's go do good. What do you say?
All right. Yep.
All
Sounds
right.
good.
Okay.
Well, a big thank you for listening to the end of our podcast. I know your time is valuable, and I hope you got a few takeaways that are going to help you get a greater return on that time. I know you will. And if you did enjoy it, I'd sure appreciate a share or a comment. Feel free to subscribe for instant access to new episodes and offers. There's also a ton of free content and ways to learn more and engage more at WorleyRealEstateNetwork.com. Until then, we'll continue to bring you recipes for success and real stories from real people who, like you, are living out your divine purpose. And hey, God loves you. No matter what happens, don't give up.